Deepinder Goyal built Zomato, which is the largest food delivery company in India today. He built Eternal, which is India's top 30 company by market cap in less than 2 decades. But the story of Deepinder's ambition isn't just 20 years old. It goes back over 50 years, 5 decades. This $30 billion in market cap is the product of relentless ambition that his father had himself more than 50 years back and instilled in Deepinder as a kid. Embedded in the story of the son is the story of his father. Welcome back to Billionaire Best Friend Maxim Monday. This is episode 4, and the Maxim we're gonna discuss today is embedded in the story of the son is the story of his father. You cannot understand Zomato without understanding Deepinder. Zomato is like Deepinder's child. It is just Deepinder's personality at scale. And you cannot understand Deepinder without understanding his father, Harbans Lal Goyal. I read the biography of Deepinder by Megha Vishwanath. It's named Unseen. I recommend you read it. And it describes Deepinder's father beautifully. He's born in a small village in a family of farmers and has a very normal childhood, except this part where it says, unlike most boys of his generation, he grew up with dreams far larger than the fields that surrounded him. He wanted to become a doctor, but life happened and he ended up becoming a biology teacher in government school, trading his own aspirations for stability. So although he's settled in his career, his children inherit his ambitions, his relentlessness. Knowingly or unknowingly, these traits get passed to Deepinder Goyal, who is Deepinder's elder brother, who ends up fulfilling his father's dream of becoming a doctor, and even more so to Deepinder, who starts Zomato and is today a billionaire. The journey of these billions started with the life savings of Deepinder's father. Although he was reluctant to see Deepinder leave a stable job and security, his actions spoke otherwise. So for those of you who don't know, Deepinder initially had the idea of Zomato while he was working as a management consultant at very good role, and he left his high paying job. His father had no idea what a startup even meant, but he believed in his son and understood his personality, his stubbornness. So he ended up supporting him with 2 lakh rupees, which was almost all of his life savings. His brother Deepinder invested too, becoming one of the earliest investors in Zomato. I bet they made millions of dollars from that deal. In a recent podcast, Deepinder reinforced this idea that his personality closely mirrors that of his father. He said, apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Ziddi main bhi hu, ziddi wo bhi hai. I'm stubborn, he's stubborn too. In the same room, if there is a difference of opinion between us, it just blows up. I mean, they don't even live in the same home. They are close, yet they live in different homes. They are so similar, he can't put up with his father because of his father's stubbornness. The same stubbornness which he himself inherited and used as fuel to build Zomato over past 17 years. The stubbornness which protected Zomato from near-death situations multiple times. For my listeners, I'd point out that Zomato, although a very big startup, was near death even as recently as 2020 during COVID times. This stubbornness which built $30 billion in shareholder value. This ambition and stubbornness that Deepinder inherited from his father reminds me exactly of the obsession with craftsmanship that Steve Jobs inherited from his father. Steve was once building a fence with his father in their backyard when his father said, "Steve, the back of a fence should be just as beautiful as the front." When Steve asked why no one would ever see it, Paul, that is the name of his father, responded, "But you will know." I want to take a pause right here because these words are just so profound. But you will know. Steve Jobs, his father, is instilling in Steve a deep sense, a respect for craftsmanship. Paul was a mechanic and a carpenter who refused to use cheap plywood for the back of a cabinet, even if it faced the wall. He believed that for a craftsman to sleep well at night, the quality had to be carried all the way through. He would use this exact idea to build insanely great products at Apple years later. The most famous tribute to his father's influence, Steve would use this exact idea to build insanely great products at Apple years later. If you've seen this movie named Jobs, which is based on Steve Jobs, there's a very good scene where Steven Wozniak, Steve Jobs' partner, is arguing with Steve regarding the arrangement of cards inside the computer. I mean, Steve Wozniak is saying, Steve, it doesn't matter how these chips are arranged. No one's gonna take a look inside. But Steve is like, well, I'm gonna know. It matters to me. These cards must be symmetrical. The most famous tribute to Steve's father's influence was the signing party in 1982. Jobs had the entire Macintosh team sign a piece of paper which he had engraved inside the plastic case of every Macintosh. Unless a user physically broke open their computer, they would never even see those signatures. But the team knew they were there, making them artists rather than just workers. This maxim reveals a simple truth. Most every man competes with his father and imitates his father, lives in fear of disappointing and craves approval. And on the extreme ends of this potentially fraught relationship, a man often spends his entire adult life trying to be exactly like his father or nothing like him. It's a simple idea. You don't escape your father's story. You either continue it or spend the rest of your life reacting against it. Either way, his story becomes yours. And in Deepinder's and Steve's story, their fathers are a positive example that their son followed. But not every child is lucky enough to have a great father. Some fathers are negative examples, cautionary tales in their own children's stories. These children run on negative fuel and win regardless. Everyone's seen or heard of the legendary movie The Godfather. A lot of people call it the best movie of all time. Francis Ford Coppola directed it. And when he was a child, his father Carmine Coppola wanted to be a musician. He was a talented flute player but could never become successful enough. So he gets bitter. He'd hate anybody who was successful and became envious and talked negatively about successful people all the time. His behavior was so toxic that at one point Carmine told Francis, yeah, but there can only be one genius in the family, and since I'm already that, what chance do you have? What kind of father says something like that to his son? Francis grew up in these circumstances and he thought, well, I don't want to be the person criticizing the successful person. I want to be the successful person. This negative fuel forged him. He became a man with no speed limit, believing that the standard pace is for chumps. He developed a remarkable ability to do whatever was necessary to get the job done, because the alternative was becoming like his father, Carmine. Francis Ford Coppola, traumatized by the emotional distance and competitive cruelty of Carmine, swung to the opposite extreme even in his personal life. With his own children, he had a rule. If I was going away for more than 10 days, I'd take my kids out of school with me. He prioritized the unity of the family over any form of work or study. The pattern is clear. The father's story lives in the son. The founder's story lives in the company. Whether the son continues the father's path or deliberately chooses the opposite, the father's influence shapes everything that follows. Embedded in the story of the son is the story of the father. Companies inherit their founder's story. Amazon still operates with Bezos' day one mentality. Apple still carries Jobs' design obsession on the positive side, but on the negative side, Steve Jobs was abandoned by his birth father, by his biological father, which created this chip on his shoulder and relentless need to prove himself. That abandonment is embedded in Apple's obsessive pursuit of perfection and control. Understanding the father's story, understanding the founder's story explains why companies behave the way they do decades later. Estee Lauder, who's the founder of L'Oreal, grew up watching her father struggle as a hardware store owner, which drove her to build a beauty empire with completely different economics. Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart, was a famous penny pincher because he grew up in the midst of the Great Economic Depression. Read the biographies. The answer to why successful people do what they do is almost always in their early years, not only in who birthed them, but also in who mentored them. David Sandra, who formalized these Maxim, he constantly says that founders are studying other founders, the son learning from the father, and that your competitive advantage comes from learning directly from the greatest entrepreneurs in history through their autobiographies and biographies. I'd like to end this episode by saying that learning is not memorizing information, it is changing your behavior. Whatever we learn in our podcast, I hope you apply it in your life. If you do not, you are listening to the wrong channel. This was Maxim Monday, episode 4. Thanks for tuning in. See you next Monday.